everyone. Happy Thursday. Well, guys, I'm so excited to have Nicole on the channel today. I've covered Nicole's story a few times, and we're going to get into all the details. I know you guys have been dying to see this conversation. Nicole is a stay-at-home mom who enrolled her daughter in kindergarten at a public school. When she asked for the curriculum and whether the school was teaching critical race theory and gender theory, the school told her to submit public records requests. Then the school board threatened to sue her for submitting the request. Now the largest teachers union in the country has filed a lawsuit against her to prevent the disclosure of these records. You know, if they don't want you to see what they're teaching, you're probably asking the right questions. Welcome, Nicole. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I saw one video you did, and I just so appreciated your point of view on it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely anxious to get into more of the story today. And I thought we would just kind of like start at the start. You were enrolling your daughter in kindergarten. So we're talking about a 5-year-old here. Like kindergarten curriculum, I don't think like should be top secret information. What happened? How did all this start?
Right. So I enrolled her in kindergarten, and then I called the principal and asked them if they taught gender theory or critical race theory. And to be clear, that was just one of my questions. I was asking all the other stuff parents ask, like, what's the enrollment in the kindergarten class? And, oh, do you guys do this after school thing? So that was really my last question in the conversation with the principal. And the whole conversation changed. There was like silence. There was, I could sense she was nervous. And she said that they don't call kindergarten, they don't call boys and girls, they don't call them boys and girls. They refrain from using gender terminology. They embed ideals or values of gender identity in the classroom. And then in terms of critical race theory, they ask kids in kindergarten what could have been done differently on Thanksgiving. And they said that they have a certain line of thinking that they teach students about history in every grade. So the Thanksgiving question sure seemed to me like they're shaming them for their American heritage. I don't know how a 5-year-old would answer that. They don't have a sense of history. I don't even think an adult can answer that. So then I said, well, why do you do that? And she said, it's a common practice. And I said, what is that? And didn't really get an answer. And then I said, well, how long have you been doing these common practices, like with not calling them boys and girls? She said, I don't know. And I said, well, can you find out and let me know? And it was, yes, but I knew that wasn't really going to happen. So I said, well, I have a whole list of questions for you. If you don't have time right now, let me email them to you. She agreed to answer the email. And when she did answer the email that had a whole list of questions, which are they really reflect like really everything I was asking in my public records request, she then told me to submit public records requests.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the key there too is that she said, due to the scope of your questions, you should submit these public records requests. And to me, that means, well, because you have so many questions, submit public records requests. Okay. Now, around the time this was happening, I was also asking for a tour of the school. And the principal said I couldn't have a tour because they're just not doing tours.
Okay.
And so then I went to the superintendent and I said, well, I have a right to see the school before my kid enters it. Can you give me a tour? She said yes. And then she came back some time later and said, actually, no, we're not giving tours. Okay, that was a problem for me. How can I just drop my 5-year-old off at school and like not even know what the inside of the classroom looks like? So I submitted all these public records requests. Oh, and I had to submit it for the curriculum. They didn't have the curriculum posted on the website. So I sent that in too. The school committee told me to submit public records requests. The director of curriculum told me to submit public records requests. So multiple people told me to do this. Mm-hmm. They were answering them. And by answering them, I mean, they're giving me estimates for information. For example, one public records request came back as $9,000 to get a request for communications of a school committee member who's also a union member. And I wanted these communications because I suspected that she was communicating with the union and the school district about how to implement critical race theory. Mm-hmm. And I was suspecting that back in, May or April. And now here are all the teacher unions saying that they want to push critical race theory out to the school. So that came back all blacked out, thousands and thousands of pages redacted. They told me to pay $9,000. I challenged them on that estimate. And I said, well, I think you should calculate it differently. And they came back and said, okay, well, $75. How about that? So it went from $9,000 to $75, which tells you like what a joke these estimates are. I asked them to, well, tell me how you calculate these estimates. Like, what is going on here? And they said no responsive documents. So, like, they literally don't have a document in the public entity explaining how they calculate it. But, they could also just tell me. They could just email me back and be like, well, this is how we do it. But no, they want to communicate only through public records requests. One
And
day
I just want to show real quick. I want to show exactly what this looked like because you posted what you got on your Twitter, and I want to show people this is what you got literally.
Yeah.
For your first 9,000 and then $75. It is literally just fully blacked out pages.
Right. And that was, you see on there, it says page 2 out of 489.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost 500 pages that are all blacked out. And I had 3 other batches. So it was literally thousands and thousands of blacked out pages. Now, I learned later that under the Access to Public Records Act in Rhode Island, communications of elected officials are exempt from public disclosure. So our public officials are communicating with each other about everything that, everything that they pass in legislation, and we're not allowed to see their communications. That's insane. And if that's, the school should have told me, oh, you're asking for communications of elected officials and that's exempt, rather than spend all this time redacting everything. Why didn't they just say it's probably going to be nothing?
Right.
Instead, they charge me for it. Okay. So then one day I wake up and I get a notification from the Secretary of State. Everyone should go on to the Secretary of State, get notifications about when your school committee meetings are. Because that's the only way I learned that my school placed my name on a public agenda saying that they were threatening to sue me for my public records requests.
Wow.
If I didn't get that notification from the Secretary of State, they would have had that meeting without me. I wouldn't have been paying attention. So I think it's really important for everyone to get those notifications so they, you're not thinking about the next school committee meeting while you're trying to, do your job and have a family. So as soon as I saw that, I reached out to Legal Insurrection, which is a conservative media outlet. And I said, this is happening to me. Can I write about this? And so that's when they hosted me on their site. And that was the first time that the story came out. And really, thanks to them was what got this ball rolling. They did such a fantastic job. And that allowed me to gather public support to come to the school committee meeting where they basically gave me a show trial. I mean, it was a 5-hour meeting about Solis and her public records request. It was the first school committee meeting I had ever been to. And it was amazing. Hundreds of people came. People came from out of state. People called me from across the country, told me that they were going to watch this. And it was just like an out-of-body experience because my school committee spent their time discussing my like moral character for submitting these public records requests. They were like having this struggle session with their feelings about my public, like how they felt about my public records requests and what they meant about me and what it meant to the community. I mean, it was ludicrous. They let people line up and call me racist. They themselves said that this individual is linked to a national racist group. And then I found out later that they hired a PR firm to write that statement about me. So they used my tax dollars to work with a PR firm to write a statement that said, I'm linked to a national racist group.
Wow.
I mean, who does that? Because I talked to people in PR and they said that is not what PR is for.
And this is all because you wanted to know what your 5-year-old would be taught in this public school.
Yep. Yeah. Now, with the public records requests themselves, you have to submit small amounts of information at a time because I could have submitted all of my requests in one request, right? Mm-hmm. So I could have, imagine taking a piece of paper and writing 200 things on it that you want to know. I could have done it that way. But if I did it that way, it would have come back as like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I wouldn't have known where to start on like, well, which information can I afford? Mm-hmm. So by submitting small, narrow requests, I would get estimates back for like, okay, this is $100. And then I could save up money and try to purchase that information. I ended up purchasing almost $1,000 of information. Um, Other than that, they're complaining right now about just giving me estimates. So it's a little misleading, I think, because they're saying, oh, we have to produce all these documents. But really, the only thing they have to do right now is give me an estimate.
Mhm.
So I think even in the complaint, it said there are $90,000 worth of pages. Oh, sorry, I'm fast forwarding to the NEA, but in the NEA complaint, that they're saying that 90,000 pages are coming toward me, but that's not true. I have to purchase that information, and I may not be able to afford it.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm getting lost on where to go
No, no,
next.
no, that's okay. That's okay. So you submitted a whole bunch, and I remember this from the school board, the school committee meeting that I watched. Is the volume of requests that you were submitted? They found particularly offensive because you were submitting small requests just to make sure that you were piecing them out bit by bit rather than including them in all one large request, and that caused a lot of consternation in the school committee when they were debating whether or not to sue you or to go into like mediation.
Right, and that is it's that also their argument there doesn't really make sense, because if I submitted one request with 200 things that I wanted to know, they would have had to have responded to me within 10 days under the law with 200 things and the estimate for that. It
Hmm.
actually worked out better for them if I would submit one request a day, because
Right.
now they have only one little thing to accomplish in 10 days. So it seems like what they're really saying is, well, you just asked for, oh, you had a lot of questions and we're really mad about that. Well,
Yeah.
it's the only way I could ask my questions were with public records requests. And you knew I had a lot of questions and you refused to answer them any other way. How are parents supposed to ask a lot of questions?
Right. Right. So how did that
So,
feel? I wanna just, like, go back to that, like, just from a very human experience, because you would think, sending your kid to school, you ask what's gonna be taught. These to me seem like very sensible questions. How did it feel to be asking pretty reasonable things and all of a sudden to find yourself in this situation where everyone's calling you a racist and the school committee is gonna sue you over just asking very like, what was that like?
so infuriating. Infuriating. When you're at a point in your life where you've made it, you have your family, you bought your house, your firstborn is going to school, like you made it through the baby years. Like it was just so hard, to get here at, age 30. I'm going to be 38 soon. And like I thought, oh my God, like I have the American dream, like I did everything I was supposed to do. I didn't mess up. And now I'm going to send my daughter to school, and I can't wait to watch her grow and thrive. And then this happens, and I'm looking at the people on this school board fumbling over their words, crying, saying they feel unsafe, threatening to sue me. And it was so infuriating to think that these, I'm sorry, like incompetent people are what were trying to like destroy me. They were trying to destroy my reputation. And to just like try to like understand to being in that position of like, I'm sorry, you think you're gonna like ruin me after I came this far in my life, and I am so happy. I have a beautiful, infuriating. And
And you
so
go ahead.
um it's really that just contempt that someone could abuse their power in that way to someone who absolutely did not deserve it and did everything they told me to do. Really opened my eyes to the abuse of government. And that's why I'm here now. I cannot allow them to do that to me or anybody else, at least not in my town.
Yeah. And you were even telling me before we came on the air, like, you used to be a Democrat. You were on the left. You believed in public schools just like me. And
Yeah.
then this happens, right?
Yep. I used to be a Democrat. I didn't change to I didn't register as a Republican, because of this. I registered as a Republican for voting issues, but I would have still voted Democrat for, a candidate that I liked. But now that this has happened, I'm like, I'm never voting Democrat again. Absolutely not. I'm not going to put another person in power who could do this to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and to be clear, I think this is a bipartisan issue. I don't think this is a Democrat or conservative issue. This is about our kids and knowing what they're being taught and not being pushed around by a school board, which is like, when you really remember, it's the government. Like, I get that they look like very benevolent sitting in this cafeteria in a room, but they are the government. They have government power, and they're using their government power against me, and they're leveraging my children to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like life or death. Like, don't put my children in this. Do not do that. This is more than that now.
Yeah, I say all the time, the greatest trick the teachers unions ever played was convincing us that teachers are not government employees.
Yeah. Yep.
Because they
And,
are.
I also know there's this sentiment out there that calling teachers government employees or, civil servants is somehow offensive. But being a civil servant is a privilege. You are part of this American tradition to represent and serve people. And if people in that position have contempt for being called a civil servant, you're in the wrong job. There are people who have worked their whole lives to get into the position of a civil servant. And if you don't think that that is a valuable position and you scoff at being called that, quit your job. We don't want you here either.
Exactly. And like, I will express just as much contempt over the fact that my taxes are paying your salary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's a big disconnect about how public school is supposed to work and the parents' role in it, which should be much bigger.
Exactly. Well, let's keep going. So this school committee meeting happened where you were raked over the coals. They did public comment on you. People who had never talked to you before were coming up and calling you a racist in front of everyone. And they ultimately decided to go into mediation in that committee hearing. What happened then?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. There was no mediation.
Okay.
Okay, mediation is a voluntary conflict resolution process facilitated by a neutral third party. That never happened. Mediation to the school committee attorneys meant they email my attorney and say, can you give us 60 more days to do everything? So the first thing they said was, can Nicole send us a list of the public records requests that like she really wants right away? Well, I want all of them. I didn't just make them for fun. And so I, through my attorney, said, well, why don't you send me the requests with a timeline that you think you can fulfill, right? I want to be reasonable. Like, you don't have to fulfill it in 10 days or whatever. Like, why don't you just work that out for me? And like, I would have said yes, right? If they were like, oh, this one is a lot of information, we need more time. Okay, great. I will agree not to file a complaint with the attorney general if you need more time. Like, that's how I thought that was going to look. And I thought that that would all happen with a mediator. It didn't. It was just the attorneys emailing my attorney, making demands on me. So they ultimately demanded 60 days to do everything. But remember, that's 60 business days. So that's more than 2 months. They wanted to stop the clock for like all summer and not give me any estimates.
Oh.
And have everything die down. And then school would start and I would be very, busy with my kids and who has time then to focus on that. So then they went to the next school committee meeting and said, Nicole rejected mediation. They lied. I didn't reject mediation. It was never offered to me. And you made unreasonable demands on me. And they also could have said, well, if you give us more time, we won't charge you for certain requests. Like give me something. Like, so what actually happened was they had a school committee meeting where they bullied and harassed me, allowed other people to bully and harass me. And then they wanted more time to give me my requests. Why on earth would I agree to that?
Right.
Just more and more bullying. So I said no to 60 days, fulfill my requests. They were continuing to give me estimates. So not information, estimates. And then suddenly I get a constable knocking on my door, serving me with a lawsuit from the NEA. And here we are now.
All right. So, guys, we're going to talk about this lawsuit, but if you're enjoying this conversation so far, please mount that like button if we want to appreciate and support Nicole. So you're getting sued by the teachers union now.
Right.
How did they get involved?
So the teachers union, especially the NEA, has infested my town. There was a school committee member on the school committee. We call them school committees in Rhode Island, not school boards. She resigned. The NEA is truly in charge of my school board. Okay. So I've heard stories that once you're elected to school board, the teacher union comes in and says, okay, well, now we tell you what to do, right? Because they campaigned for you. They pay for the campaigns of school committee members, right? So now you're kind of like indebted to them once you're on the board to do their bidding. I think this is collusive litigation. So the school committee and the school board get together behind closed doors and say, okay, you're going to play the part of the plaintiff. I'll play the part of the defendant. We'll go to court. And then the school board, who, by the way, to clear it up, they are also named as a defendant, right? So the NEA is suing the school board and me. Okay, so of course the school board will go to court and say, oh, okay, yeah, we submit. We won't fulfill the request that you don't want us to fulfill. So that's how they're involved. I think they worked it out behind closed doors.
So what is their interest in all of this? They just don't want the information, the curriculum to be, what is their interest, I guess?
Right. So they don't want information about teachers who are possibly teaching CRT released. And what they state in the complaint.
But I thought CRT wasn't being taught in schools.
Right. Right. I mean, and that's like the whole thing here. The thing that I want and that I think most parents want is just transparency. Like if it's being taught, admit it, and then we can all have a debate about it, because this is a matter of public concern. So what they say in the complaint is, all right. Sorry, I don't want to waste time. They don't want information about their teachers being released if teachers are writing emails about CRT and revealing probably that they're teaching it, because they think that their teachers will be subject to harassment. Now, of course, no one wants anybody to be harassed, certainly not in the way the NEA has been harassing me. But if teachers are teaching it in South Kingstown, that's a matter of public concern. It should be subject to public disclosure, and it is subject to public disclosure. So that's why I think they're bringing this complaint, because it's not a privacy issue. When you're a public employee and you write an email on your public email address, that is public information that if someone requests it can be released. Emails from teachers in Rhode Island have already revealed that teachers are influencing students with their politics. This happened in Barrington. We had a teacher tell students that if they go to testify on a bill banning CRT, right?
I was testifying for that bill, and I was supposed to get extra time to testify for that bill. And because so many of those students signed up, I got 1 minute and was shouted down by the chair of the committee.
See? Yep. So the only way we found out that Barrington teacher did that was with an email, because the school department said they didn't know she did that. There was no curriculum saying that she was going to do that, right? It's not in the curriculum when a teacher is doing something wrong. So the emails are important, and the emails also reveal if you're being targeted. For example, Legal Insurrection, they uncovered emails between my superintendent and the Rhode Island Superintendents Association talking about parents who live in a separate Fox News reality that are submitting public records requests, right? So now we have my superintendent, the Rhode Island Superintendents Association, and my state representative all agreed to try to amend the Public Records Act so that way I couldn't submit more public record requests. And it was only through email that we learned that they're doing this. So I understand people are upset. They think this is an invasion of privacy to get teacher emails, but the truth is teacher emails are public information. Yeah, and I do believe they will reveal that teachers are either teaching CRT or targeting parents. And we cannot have state employees targeting parents.
Right.
There were other emails in another town in Rhode Island that showed a teacher and people in the school department started talking about another mom who had another Facebook group that was against CRT. And they called the police on this mother because she had a Facebook group opposing CRT and they felt threatened by it. And those emails revealed that. So there's a lot of things going on in public school that should not be going on. And those emails are key to understanding what's going on.
So this is actually really helpful for people who are fighting back against CRT, especially in schools, because this is an angle, honestly, I had never thought of before this. People need to go for the emails. That's
Yeah,
what that's where we're going to get the really good information from.
right. Because, and you know, and as I was submitting my public records request, sometimes I would get a document back where it would reveal something to me that I didn't think. It's almost like, you know, you're a detective, and you
Mhm.
have to be a detective because no one's answering your questions. So then I would look at something and go, oh, what the heck is that? What is this request for proposal for an equity audit? I should request that next.
Mhm.
So submitting public records requests lead you down a trail and you can see what your school is doing. With that particular request, I had requested the RFP, a request for proposal for an equity audit. We know that schools are doing equity audits,
Yes.
which then lead to them justifying dumbing down the curriculum. Okay. So when I requested the RFP for the equity audit, it came back and said that they were looking for an auditor fluent in critical race theory. Why are they looking for an auditor fluent in critical race theory if critical race theory isn't being taught? And this is for an
Wow.
equity audit for the curriculum.
Wow. Because equity and critical race theory have the same goal.
Right.
And they're
But
starting to use equity as the replacement term for critical race theory, and then they can say we're not teaching critical race theory, we're
right,
teaching equity. It's the same thing.
right, right. But and I just couldn't believe that, like right there, it said fluent in critical race theory. Like, how can you refute that? And yet, you know, people that are my critics will refute it. They'll be like, oh, well, I mean, like you could just be doing an audit with critical race theory and not teaching it. And so they like really bend over backwards here. And
Yes.
it's like, well, I still need an answer though. Like what is happening here? Because I'm not just going to rationalize it away. Another thing I found outside of my public records request was a tweet from an organization which I believe does professional development on teachers that said, congratulations, South Kingstown teachers, for implementing CRT practices.
Wow.
Okay.
They're
I
doing it
mean,
right out in the open.
it's right out in the open. Yeah. I just had to click on links on Twitter. You know, my school has a Facebook, a Twitter account, a YouTube account. They have all these official accounts for the school. So they really kind of open themselves up for being investigated. So if people want to do that, see if your school has all these official accounts. You can find clues there because they can't help themselves. They're just going to brag about what they're doing with critical race theory,
Right.
thinking that, you know, they're making it look like it's not critical race theory.
So I just want to put a fine point on this because you know what you did is something that any parent can do if you take the time just to kind of look at what the school is putting out on social media, make the requests, like take the time to fill out the forms, take the time to ask the questions. You know, what are some of the what are some of the steps that you've taken in all this? You've obviously done the public records request, you investigated the social media posts. It seems like you've been like searching for different keywords in relation to their social media. What else have you done?
Yeah, just one more point about the public records request.
Sure.
Public records requests, when they get it, they have to look at your language very specifically. They have to respond to your request based on the exact words you use. So if I had just submitted a request for like critical race theory curriculum in the district, they would have come back and said no responsive documents because they don't actually have the words critical race theory in the curriculum to give me. But if I said, you know, lessons on equity, maybe that would have turned something up. So that's another reason why I had to submit so many requests, because you can't just ask one way because there are all these buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sorry, could you just repeat your question one more time that
No,
you asked?
I'm curious about just like the different things that you did just to investigate this. So I think you just made a really good point. You've got to think about all the keywords they're using that are not critical race theory. So equity, social justice, diversity,
Whiteness,
whiteness.
implicit bias. Like
Mm-hmm.
another thing you can ask for are the materials from the implicit bias trainings. Okay, they usually come with materials for teachers. They might say, oh, there's a copyright, we can't give it to you, but your taxes hired that vendor to do this implicit bias training, and you're entitled to see those materials. The request for a proposal for the equity audit is a big one. Another thing I asked for, which is kind of interesting, it wasn't successful, I asked them for evidence of systemic racism in the school district. Right? So the schools are
Mm-hmm.
saying our school district is systemically racist. We're just, okay, well, prove it.
Right.
What show me? I mean, you know, if they want to convince people to get on board with systemic racism, which really is more like a religion, right? Well, okay,
Yes.
convert me, prove it to me. Don't just tell me to believe it, or else you're going to call me racist. Maybe work a little harder on trying to convince me that our country is irredeemably racist and all of us have to do all this, hard work with honest conversations about other people's lived experiences. Like, how about show me some real evidence? They came back and said, your request is unclear. Okay, well,
Wow.
you've been pretty clear about systemic rape. What's so unclear about that? So then I said, okay, if they're not going to give it to me that way, what's another thing I'd ask for? I asked for reports of racist discrimination in the school district over the past 10 years. Maybe there's been an uptick of racist incidents that I don't know of, right? I mean, I'm just trying to find a way to justify all their claims. They're very upset about that request. Trying to, I wish I could have more examples of things that worked, but the truth is the school is not responding to my request. I don't really know what's going to work.
Mhm.
I think if you focus on the buzzwords and do them in small requests, you're going to be more successful to get materials and documents that they have to hand over.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm gonna give a not so subtle nudge to anyone watching this is like, listen, like Nicole's saying she's not having luck with it. That doesn't mean you won't have luck
Right,
with it.
right. Because I know someone that submitted a request for something to the Rhode Island Department of Education, and they handed it over like immediately and didn't make them pay for it. Whereas the same request that I submitted in my district was like, oh, we're going to need 30 days to get back to you on that. So every district is going to be different, and you should definitely try, because if you get back documents that you think didn't answer your question and they're non-responsive, you can then file a complaint with the Attorney General saying that they violated your state's Public Records Act.
Mhm.
And then the Attorney General will make a decision about whether they did violate the act and what the consequences will be. And the consequences might be that they then have to produce the documents that they should have produced to begin
Mhm. Mhm. So where we are now is you and the school are being sued by the NEA, but the school probably colluded with the NEA because they wanted to get sued, so they didn't have to fulfill your public records requests. Where are you going from here with this?
So they don't have standing. A third party cannot bring a lawsuit on a public records request. The only people that have any cause of action are the requester, me, and the public entity, which is the school. So there's actually a Rhode Island Supreme Court case that already said that they can't do this, which is a big problem for them because it makes them look almost negligent in bringing this lawsuit. Like, judges don't like having hearings about these lawsuits in court when it looks pretty incompetent. You're wasting the court's time. So we're going to answer the complaint, and we have a legal strategy that's confidential,
Yeah.
but we'll be in court, and it will be very interesting to see what the school has to say.
What does success look like for you out of this scenario? What are you hoping happens?
Academic transparency.
Mhm.
Um, the Goldwater Institute has fantastic model policy for this. It was exactly what I wanted. And what they propose, and what I think is the answer to all this, is to have schools post online on their website all of their lesson plans, all of their lesson materials, all of their courses, all of their books, everything. All the handouts where they put CRT stuff on it and it's not in the curriculum and you can't see it. Have that all posted from the year before so parents can go online and say, okay, what did they do last year? I want to see what's going on in these courses. If there is academic transparency online with everything like that, I don't have to submit public records requests. The school doesn't have to, say that they're so burdened by public records requests. There's going to be no controversy about CRT because presumably they're not teaching it, and we can see in everything they're teaching that they are in fact not teaching it, which is probably not true, but that's what I think the answer is, and that's my ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I know North Carolina had a bill for educational transparency this past year. I'm trying to get one in New Hampshire. I think they're going to do it. I've talked to several lawmakers about that. Is there anything in the works in Rhode Island insofar as mandating educational transparency?
No, but I'm gonna try to push for it. I know, there's a state representative, Pat Morgan, who proposed that,
Yes.
CRT ban. Ultimately, I don't think those bans are the greatest thing because, you have like constitutional First Amendment problems, and so I think academic transparency is really the way to go.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? So the Rhode Island bill was actually based on the bill that I was working on in New Hampshire. And there is actually a provision in the bill that says you can teach any of the concepts in the bill. You just have to do it from an objective perspective. You can't be an activist. You can't advocate for them. You have to say some people believe this, some people believe that, and allow for dissent. And that's something
Yeah.
people don't understand about those bills.
Yes, and you're totally right. I just
Mhm.
think that it won't work like
Oh,
with
I agree.
optics. You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
no one's going to vote for it, especially in Rhode Island. We have all Democrats who are pro CRT, and as soon as you use the word ban, even the most narrowly tailored bill that says what you
Mhm.
what you said, I just don't think it's going to go through.
Yeah, and I also don't think I don't think it's the long-term answer. Even in states, and New Hampshire passed a very watered down version of it because my governor's a rhino. But like even if those bills get fully implemented, the thing of it is teachers are going to ignore them. We already
Right.
know this. Teachers have come out and bragged and signed petitions saying I will go to jail as long as I can still teach critical race theory. And it's like we need to change the culture by helping people to be more informed about what is going on so that they can do exactly what you've done and say, this is not okay with me.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I also like an academic transparency bill because it's proactive.
Yeah.
You're telling the school you have to do something, not you can't do this. Like this is what you have to do to solve the problem.
Well, I just want to get a couple super chats in here. Battle Gnome says, no, this is pretty much a leftist issue, not bipartisan. Can we please stop pretending about the myth of principled symmetrical neutrality? The emperor is naked AF and he is a Marxist. I mean, I disagree. I do think that the left is primarily responsible for what's going on right now, but the right could be doing a whole heck of a lot more that they are not doing. So it is everyone's fault, so far as I'm concerned. Jenny's getting inky with it has a question. Is there anything that prevents the requester from making the documents they requested public? May make it easier for others making requests.
I don't think I understand the question. Does she mean like when I receive the documents?
I think from making the yeah, I think like if you receive the documents, can you just make those documents public?
Well, yeah, because they're already public information.
Hmm.
So if they're public information, I can post them. I can do anything I want with them because they're public.
Yeah. Could you make the requests that you wrote public so that people could see how to do it?
Every request I made is public, and you can submit a public records request at my school for all of Nicole Solis's public records requests.
Oh, wouldn't that be a fun activity for everyone? What if everyone watching right now submitted a request to Nicole's school for Nicole's request? Wouldn't that be a fun activity for
Yeah, you
them?
should get a list of all of them, and that is, what the NEA said they did, that they
Mhm.
requested all of my requests.
Hmm. Hmm. Nicole, what have you learned from this experience?
Oh my God, where do I start? Well, first of all, I've learned that government is not scary; it's more incompetent, and that you shouldn't be afraid to engage government, especially when you're advocating for your kids. Um, because they're not like we're not exactly dealing with the Kremlin when you're going against a school board. They may act like the Kremlin, but they don't have the power of the Kremlin behind them, and not even the brains. Like the Kremlin was like way smarter. So push back on them because they'll fold. My superintendent resigned. The chair of the school committee who defamed me resigned. The vice chair stepped down. Another school committee member resigned, and I'm just one person. I am not part of some like right wing, whatever they said. Like literally, I'm just a mom. Um, and then the other thing I learned that is you will overcome and survive retaliation. They called
Mhm.
me a racist in the national media. I'm still here, and um, it it's overcomable. And so your kids are worth the risk of that.
Mhm. And you kind of just hit on my next question, but I hear all the time from parents, they're afraid to speak up because of the retaliation. They don't want to be canceled. They don't want their kids to experience any negative repercussions. But you kind of just spoke to this like you can get through it. It's okay. It's not necessarily the most fun thing to go through, but do you regret speaking up?
No, no, and I don't want to uh, you know s- um, like dismiss that fear either. I'm just trying to demystify it a little so that way more people will step up. I did put my daughter in private school because I do want to protect her. I do think my school will target her if I kept her in public school. So I think there are things parents have to do that's right for them to protect their kids if they are going to speak up.
Hmm. How has your perception of public schools changed going through this experience?
There are way more problems than I thought there were. I went to public school and private school. Um, I wasn't aware of how public school worked. As a kid, I wasn't aware of teacher unions, and now I think it's gotten to a point, especially with CRT and COVID, where I don't know if public school is redeemable at this point because they just keep going farther and farther away from academic standards. I mean, I just don't know how many more things we can give public school to do with, social justice and, you know, all these things that they want, social emotional learning. And it's like we're so far away from just learning to read that I don't really know if it's truly a school anymore. Um, but other than that, I really haven't worked out more sophisticated opinions. I just know that it's not for me.
How did you how did you start to become aware of critical race theory and all this stuff to begin with?
I don't know. I guess I'm just on Facebook a lot, all there and Twitter. But my school had a message that the chair a couple chairs ago sent out to the community pledging allegiance to Black Lives Matter. And so this was when my daughter was 3 or 4. I wasn't enrolling her yet, and it was sort of like town politics that I wasn't really involved in. And then that's when I decided to like check on it when I enrolled her to be like, did they follow through with this whole systemic racism thing? And sure enough, they did.
Mhm. What other advices or pieces of information would you offer that we haven't covered already about what's going on?
If you're gonna engage your school and ask questions, put everything in email
Mm,
because as I've been telling my story, especially to the media, they want to substantiate my claims. And because the media, they don't want to tell a story that could possibly defame someone, say something happened that didn't happen. So all of my emails were really, really useful for saying like, this did happen and I have it in writing. If you're going to call your school, I mean, I don't know what kind of audience is watching, but maybe it sounds too far, but in my state you can record people without uh, two parties consent. So as long as I have consent to record, I can record someone I'm talking to. And if you're going to call your school and you live in that state, I would record them without them knowing. That's how another parent in New York recorded their private school headmaster or principal of saying, yes, we are teaching this to shame white kids, something like that. Right. So that came out with a recorded call. Another thing I would do is not accept non-answers. So when I asked for a tour of the school and they kept saying, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, sure. Eventually, I would email them back and be like, I'm still waiting. It's been 10 days since you said I could have a tour. So don't just wait for the email to die. Email them back. Be like, you said you follow up. Okay. Um, Go to school committee meetings in person is really a big deal because I learned that people don't really go to school committee meetings, and when they do, the school committee or school board is like, "Oh, who are you? What's your problem? What are you going to say to us?" It's kind of like
mhm.
unnerving. And go to school committee meetings with a lot of people because you want your representatives to know that you're watching them and that you have questions and you might challenge them. Um, and then something that's useful for me in my town, when I send an email to my town council, there's a certain email address for the town council that when you send it, it becomes a public record. So if you want to alert your town council about something that's going on with your school board, see if you have that option because it's a really easy way to let the rest of the town know in a town council meeting that this is going on with the school, and it's a way to kind of like put up a notice to get people involved.
Mhm. Awesome. And how have you received a lot of support since your case has been so public?
Yeah, I have a lot of support. I had moms in my town reach out to me, um, of course, privately. And then people every day send me messages of support, and especially on Twitter, people are just it's overwhelming. I didn't know how big of an issue it was. I thought my town was just kind of crazy.
Oh no, everything has gone insane now, and
Yeah,
you're definitely on the front lines. And guys, if you aren't following Nicole on Twitter, I definitely recommend you do, because you're posting documents all the time on Twitter. You have one of the best like anti-CRT like school Twitters in existence. So right now, so far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I have a lot of documents that I still am going to post. I'm just trying to get it out slowly to show people, like, hopefully they can look at these documents and request those documents from their school too, or something similar.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nicole, I want to thank you so much for being so public and being so brave. I know it's not easy and it's like not something that any of us sign up for when we start doing this sort of thing, but you're a really powerful voice for all of this, and the fight is so, so, so important. So thank you for your bravery and for putting yourself and your family out there.
Thank you. Thanks so much for talking to me, Karin.
Absolutely. Guys, if you enjoyed this chat, please mount that like button on the way out the door. I will not be doing a live stream tomorrow. Usually on Fridays, I do a live stream at 3, but I will be speaking at a walkaway event about critical race theory in Massachusetts tomorrow. So I unfortunately will be at that. But I will see you guys all next week, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.